Somewhere off the coast of Greenland, beneath a ceiling of pack ice and polar darkness, $1.5 billion Russian submarine is moving very, very quietly toward a cable that carries the financial and military communications of an entire alliance. This is a hypothetical scenario built from real capabilities for education and entertainment. But the tactics, the physics, and the hardware are all real. And that's what makes this worth your time. Here is the question this breakdown will answer. When a Yasen-M runs silent under Arctic ice, exploiting every layer of cold water the ocean can offer, how does the US Navy find it before it reaches the cable, without ever giving away that it's there? The answer involves a 4-link kill chain, a physics trick the Russians cannot switch off, and a climax that involves no explosion at all. Stay with this. The target is a seabed cable junction roughly 200 nautical miles southwest of Jan Mayen Island. That junction is not famous. It is not guarded by a warship. But it carries terabits of transatlantic data per second. Finance, intelligence, command. And the NATO members on either side of that cable have built their real-time coordination around it. Cut it, and you don't sink a ship. You blind an alliance. The Russian boat assigned to probe that junction is a Yasen-M, Project 885M. This is not a Cold War relic. This is the most capable Russian submarine currently at sea, roughly 13,800 tons submerged, armed with Kaliber and Onyx cruise missiles in vertical launch cells forward of the sail, and driven by a pump jet propulsor that, at low speed, produces almost no cavitation signature. At 3 knots, it is very nearly silent. The Yasen-M's commanding officer knows the Arctic is his ally. The polar ocean is acoustically complicated in a way that favors the patient. Cold, dense water near the surface sits over warmer intermediate layers and that thermal gradient. The thermocline bends sound downward like a lens. Noise generated near the surface curves away from shallow sensors. A submarine running below the thermocline can effectively hide inside an acoustic shadow zone where passive sonar range drops from over 50 kilometers to under 5. In open Atlantic water, the US Navy's advantage in passive sonar is significant. Under Arctic ice, with ice noise filling the water column like static on a broken radio, that advantage shrinks by up to 70%. The Yasen-M's captain has done this math. He is confident. What's most surprising about this scenario isn't how capable the Yasen-M is. It's how long the US side has been watching it before it even left port. The American response opens not underwater, but in the air. A P-8A, Poseidon Maritime Patrol aircraft, a militarized Boeing 737, lifts off from Naval Air Station Keflavik in Iceland and begins laying a Sonobuoy barrier along the Yasen-M's projected track. A sonobuoy is a disposable acoustic sensor the size of a large thermos. It enters the water, deploys a hydrophone on a cable to a preset depth, and begins transmitting what it hears back to the P-8A overhead. A single P-8A can carry and deploy dozens of them in a pattern designed by acoustic oceanographers who have modeled exactly where the convergence zones will be in this patch of ocean on this day. Here is the physics that the Yasen-M cannot escape. Even when sound is bent downward by the thermocline and disappears into the shadow zone, it doesn't disappear forever. The ocean has a depth limit, the seafloor, and below the thermocline, the water gets cold enough and dense enough that sound curves back upward. It travels in a great arc, down and back up, and where it resurfaces is called the convergence zone. At these convergence zones, typically 30 to 60 nautical miles from the source, sound reappears with surprising strength. Think of it like a flashlight beam bouncing off a curved mirror. You can't see it in the middle, but it shows up bright at a specific distance. The P-8A's sonobuoy pattern is placed not randomly, but precisely at the predicted convergence zone of the Yasen-M's patrol depth. The Yasen-M, running silent below the layer, does not know the acoustic net is above it. But here is where the obstacle appears. The P-8A's barrier catches a contact. Something is down there, consistent with a large nuclear submarine. But the data is ambiguous. Arctic ice is noisy. Calving glaciers, thermal cracking, biological sources. The water column off Greenland sounds like a construction site. 3 hours of sonobuoy data produce a track that keeps fading in and out. The acoustic oceanography team aboard the P-8A cannot confirm a firing solution. They cannot even confirm vessel type with certainty. This is the friction point. The kill chain has 4 links: P-8A, Sonobuoy Field, Virginia-class submarine, and command authority. Right now, Link 2 is producing noise, not confirmation. The Yasen-M is still moving. The second link in that chain is already in the water. A Virginia-class fast attack submarine, roughly 7,900 tons submerged, driven by a pump jet of its own, equipped with the AN/BQQ-10 wide aperture sonar array, has been trailing the Yasen-M's general operating area for the better part of 48 hours. I spent time going through the open literature on Virginia-class acoustic performance, and one detail keeps coming back. The boat operates under a doctrine of persistent silence. No active pinging. No radar emissions. No radio transmissions unless unavoidable. The Virginia-class is a listener, and in this environment, the listener wins. The Virginia-class commanding officer receives compressed burst data from the P-8A via a floating wire antenna, a transmission so brief it is essentially undetectable, and repositions. The Virginia-class moves to a depth where it sits just below the thermocline, using the layer itself as a kind of acoustic mirror. Sound from above reflects off the layer and stays in the upper water column. Sound from below the layer stays down. The Virginia is positioned in between, with one ear on each world. At this depth, the AN/BQQ-10 begins to hear the Yasen-M directly, not the bounced convergent zone signal, the direct path signal. Faint. Consistent. The pump jet of a large submarine at low speed has a specific tonal frequency signature. The rate at which the blades rotate, the harmonics of the shaft, the subtle vibrations of machinery. Every submarine has an acoustic fingerprint as distinct as a human voice. The Yasen-M's captain believes he is invisible. He is not. He is being read like a book. Put yourself in the Virginia's sonar operator's chair for a moment. You have a contact. You are not allowed to ping. You are not allowed to shoot. Your job is to build a track. Bearing, speed, depth, course. Using only the sounds the other submarine is making, and to stay close enough that if the order comes, you can act within seconds. You do this in total silence, for hours, in water that is trying to confuse you at every frequency. Here's the part that doesn't make sense on the surface. The harder the Yasen-M works to be quiet, the more information it gives away. Because a submarine running at ultra-low speed has to manage its reactor coolant pumps, its electrical systems, its crew, its navigation. Every system makes noise. The effort to suppress noise actually highlights the noises you cannot suppress. The Virginia's operators are not listening for loud sounds. They are listening for the specific pattern of quiet, and that pattern is unique to a Yasen-M. By the time the Yasen-M is within 80 nautical miles of the cable junction, the Virginia has a full track. Bearing confirmed. Depth estimated at 240 meters, below the thermocline, above the seafloor. Speed approximately 4 knots. The course is direct toward the junction. The kill chain is now complete. Link 1. P-8A with barrier sonobuoys has cued the area. Link 2. The sonobuoy field provided the initial detection and track ambiguity that drove the repositioning. Link 3. The Virginia class has a solid direct path contact and a confirmed firing solution. Link 4. Command authority has been briefed via the compressed burst. Command does not authorize a torpedo. Not yet. Not unless the Yasen-M does something kinetic. What command authorizes is the knock. An MH-60R Seahawk helicopter, already airborne from a NATO surface vessel operating well outside the Yasen-M's passive sonar range, drops a dipping sonar into the water column directly above the Russian boat's track. A dipping sonar is exactly what it sounds like. A transducer on a cable, lowered from a hovering helicopter into the water, capable of both passive listening and active pinging. In passive mode, it confirms the contact. Then, on command, it goes active. A single active ping in the right geometry is not just a noise. It is a message. Here is what the active ping does physically. It propagates outward in all directions at roughly 1,500 meters per second. When it strikes the hull of the Yasen-M, some energy bounces back. But that is not the point. The point is that the ping, received on the Yasen-M's hydrophones, has a specific bearing and a specific frequency. The bearing tells the Russian sonarman where the dipping sonar is. The frequency tells them it is a dipping sonar from an MH-60R. The timing. Arriving precisely as the submarine is on a direct course toward a NATO cable junction in waters the Alliance monitors continuously. Tells the Yasen-M's captain something else entirely. It tells him he has been tracked. For how long, he does not know. From what platform on the surface or below, he does not know. But he has been tracked. Here's the take that will probably get us pushback. The Yasen-M's captain made the correct tactical decision to attempt this approach. His acoustic discipline was close to perfect. Under different oceanographic conditions, in different water, the convergence zone advantage the P-8A exploited might not have existed. This scenario works for NATO because the physics of this specific patch of Arctic Ocean on this day favored the detection geometry. The margin was narrower than the comfortable narrative suggests, simultaneously. And this is the part that closes the trap. The Virginia-class releases a MH-48 torpedo from its forward tubes. Not a full power run. A wire-guided deployment. Slow, quiet, with the wire still attached. The torpedo travels 3 kilometers on a bearing that passes 500 meters ahead of the Yasen-M's bow and goes silent. The Yasen-M's sonarmen hear the torpedo motor. They classify it. They report to their captain. The captain now has 2 data points. A dipping sonar above him, and a MH-48 in the water that just told him exactly where the wire leads back to. He knows there is a Virginia-class within firing range. He knows the Virginia has been tracking him long enough to put a torpedo precisely across his path. He does not know if there is a second torpedo already in the water behind him. What do you think? Does a submarine commander in that position press on toward the cable, or does the rational calculus of the situation override the mission? Comment your answer below, because the doctrine debate is real. The Yasen-M turns. Not immediately. There are approximately 4 minutes of course holding that the Virginia's sonar team tracks with clinical attention, annotating every second in the acoustic record. But it turns. North, then northwest. Away from the cable junction. Away from the MH-48's last known position. The pump jet increases to roughly 8 knots, and the contact begins to fade as the Yasen-M drives back below the convergence zone geometry. The P-8A marks the track. The Virginia holds its position, listening to the acoustic wake of the retreating submarine for another 6 hours, cataloging every tonal, every machinery harmonic, every residual signature as the Yasen-M's sound level drops toward the noise floor. The cable junction is undamaged. No one fired a shot in anger. No ship surfaced. No distress call went out. Officially, nothing happened. But here is what actually happened. The United States Navy now possesses a detailed acoustic fingerprint of one of Russia's most advanced operational submarines at multiple speeds, depths, and power settings. In conditions the Yasen-M's designers intended to be its most concealed environment. That recording goes into a library. Every Allied sonar operator, every passive array on the Atlantic floor, every future P-8A barrier will be looking for that specific set of tonal frequencies. The Yasen-M just made itself easier to find for the rest of its operational life. One thing about the Sonobuoy that almost no one talks about, it costs a few $1,000s. The Yasen-M is priced at roughly $1.6 billion. The entire detection network that tracked this submarine, the Sonobuoys expended, the flight hours, the dipping sonar deployment, cost less than a rounding error on the Russian boat's maintenance budget. That is the asymmetry the Arctic hunt is built on. You do not need to match the enemy's hull for hull. You need to own the information environment, and information is cheap. Here's what this tells us about undersea warfare in the current era. The muscle mindset. Send a more capable submarine, run more quietly, build a better pump jet. Runs directly into the information mindset, which says, we don't have to be better, we just have to know where you are first. The moment you are heard, you are already targeted. Staying silent the longest is not a defensive posture. It is the offensive one. The Yasen-M's captain did almost everything right. His boat ran quiet. His crew maintained discipline. He exploited the thermocline correctly. He was defeated not by a superior weapon, but by a superior picture. A complete, connected, layered understanding of the water column that his own sensors never matched. Will the next Yasen-M sortie end the same way? Comment why yes if you think the acoustic advantage holds, or no if you think the Russians close the gap. We read every answer, if you want the next breakdown. How NATO's SOSUS successor and distributed undersea sensor networks extend that picture across the entire North Atlantic. Drop a comment and we'll build it. Subscribe if this kind of honest, technical analysis is what you're here for. The channel exists for one reason. You leave knowing more than you arrived.